to start. We're going to switch things up a little bit. David's going to go be a full-time photographer instead of trying to do two things at one time. Can you all hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, so I don't need a mic. Thank God. Housekeeping and very little housekeeping. Saturday morning, West Rock, and it's at the bright early hour of 7 a.m. That way we can get in and get out, but then we can go across the street and have breakfast. And that West Rock is followed by the Solve cleanup meeting down at the Boys and Girls Club on 92nd and Herald, starting at 10. And that's all we have for this week, unless somebody wants to come and help us spray weeds Sunday around 10.
Are we going to do that at 10 Sunday?
Is that okay? I'd
That's
rather
fine.
do it at 10.
No, that's fine.
Penny, isn't
Dad?
it supposed to rain Sunday?
Doug,
Yes.
Doug, bite your tongue.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be raining right now also.
Oh, no.
Okay. Well, Shar wants us to introduce ourselves, so we'll go around the room and introduce give us your name and maybe what section of Lents you're coming from. And Raven is here.
Go ahead. It's fine.
And
It's
Chris
really
is
fine.
here. These are our speakers today. And we're missing one.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're not
start
that
with Raven.
formal. Don't worry
I'm
about
Raven
it.
Russell. I'm with Helping Hands. I'm the Director of Data and Major Projects. We're opening the Ivy Lakes Hope Center at the Wapato property. Most of you have probably seen us in the news. I'm from...
You need a mic.
I do probably.
There's 2 mics there.
There are 2 mics there.
So I'm Raven Russell from the
But now they're not on.
They
it's
should
fine.
be on.
It's fine. It's on.
Maybe we just need
Well,
to
the
turn
one
it
she has isn't.
This one is...
Oh, wait.
on. It was a minute ago.
I just heard you.
Oh, we can hear you,
I
right?
think the volume might have been down. Can you try it again?
Testing.
I think she turned it off. You turned it off.
There's not a...
Testing.
There
Oh,
you
that's
go.
better. Sorry.
Yeah,
Hi.
it's on.
I'm Raven Russell. I work with Helping Hands. We're opening the Ivy Lakes Hope Center at the former Wapato property, and I'm a resident of Goose Hollow, not Lents.
Hi everybody, I'm Chris Davis. I'm the Deputy Chief of the Police Bureau, and I'm coming to you from the part of Lents today that is actually coated in graffiti, and it's just on the other side of the Willamette River in downtown.
Pete Thomas, just lived down the end of Playville Court here.
Don Johnson, after about 4 years on 107.
I'm the other half. I'm Cindy, my husband, and we live on 107, and both been here 4 years.
Joe Jennings. I live about 6 blocks up the hill on Krieger.
Hi, Ed.
Ed Murahart. I live up on Mount Scott. I don't live in Lents. I'm on 105th.
You do live in Lents.
I live in Mount Scott.
Okay. Denial.
I want the name change.
Uh-huh.
Nile is not a river in Egypt.
I'm Dave. I just moved to Lents like 3 weeks ago from Foster Powell. I live on, I think, 92nd and Herald, right by the Boys and Girls Club. So.
You gonna come out and help us clean Saturday?
Yeah, I'll come help out. Sounds fun. I saw you gotta like register online or something like that, or?
Well, that's already full, so I'm gonna bring some paper registration. You just have to sign on.
Okay. Cool, I'll be there.
Welcome to the hood.
Thank you.
My name's Bill Bates. I live up 97th.
In the Bermuda
You
Triangle.
live down by Penny, I
I
am.
live 2 doors down from Penny.
Oh, we're sorry.
So see,
Juanita Swartwood. I live on 92nd and Harney Court.
Doug Morrow. I live at 103rd and Ellis.
I'm Mo Murphy, and I'm with Doug, and I'm also on 103rd and Ellis, and that's between Harold and Foster, and we've lived there over 40 years.
Still alive.
Penny, I live on 105th, down the street from Mr. Ed over there, who doesn't live in Lents.
Me?
Yeah.
Bob Field. I live out in the Centennial neighborhood, but I attend this church and I'm part of the Community Connection Center. So, yay! So we always come out and make sure we support the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Doug Armstrong. I'm from
way far north Lents, otherwise known as Park Rose. I got an invite from Shar this evening, so happy to be here.
Happy to have you.
Neola.
I'm Neola Larson. I actually live in Reed, but I like these people better.
Norman Staples. I'm a sergeant in East Precinct, and I've worked out here for the better part of 12, 15 years.
Thanks for coming out.
Yep.
I'm Kenny Wilson. I live down in the Bermuda Triangle right on the Springwater, so I get to see all the fun stuff. Welcome, all of you. We're going to start with Chris. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. The photographer. Sorry, David.
I'm David Potts, attempting to be the AV guy tonight. Shar and I founded this group about 3 years ago, and we're glad that you're all here. Thank you.
I'm the other David Ashton, the editor and janitor of EastPortlandNews.com. Now more than 4,300 stories all about outer East Portland. Either a magnificent achievement or evidence of a misspent life.
Well, welcome. Thanks for coming out again. We're happy to see you, David.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to start with Chris tonight. He's going to give us a brief discussion, and then we'll open the floor for some questions and answers. Chris, it's all yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me without this, or should I use the mic, you think?
Use the mic.
Okay. So I don't have a whole lot to talk about. I'd really rather just have a conversation, but I'll share a couple of things that are going on in the Police Bureau right now. Probably our biggest challenge by far is resources. So first, COVID hit, and that was challenging for all city bureaus, and certainly ours, because we have a mixture of people who have to come to work and people who don't. And so we had to navigate through all of that, and then we finished the budget development process, and we took a fairly large budget cut just in the budget development process, and then in about, what was that, a month ago, City Council amended the budget to take even more out, and so for next year's budget we are $27 million less out of the general fund than this year. That's about 10% of our budget. We're about a $225 or so million a year budget, and not all of that comes from the general fund. Some of that comes from program revenue or grants or some other sources, but the bulk of that comes from the general fund. What that means is that we, along with some of these budget cuts came directed cuts of specific programs. One was our school resource officer program, so we will no longer have officers in schools. That means that call load, that's about 5,200 calls a year, I think, will end up going to patrol. And then, a lot of the programs that we participated in with school resource officers in the schools, because it wasn't just about responding to calls. There was a lot of relationship work and work with kids and work with school administrators and school staff. That none of that happens anymore. We were also directed to cut our gun violence response team, and that was about $2.4 million worth there, if I'm remembering that correctly. And then we were directed to remove our officers from the transit police by the end of this calendar year. We have a contract with TriMet to keep those officers there until the end of this year. That'll help us a little bit, because that's not actually a cut out of our budget. Those are revenue-backed positions, so TriMet reimburses us 105% of our costs for the officers that we have assigned there. We actually make a little bit of money off of that. The idea is that it covers all of any kind of overhead and administrative costs. So what that meant was that we had to find a place for all of those officers that were in those positions within the positions we're still authorized for. This is interesting for us, I guess is the word that I would use, because we were already one of the leanest major city police agencies in the United States. We usually are neck and neck with San Diego in terms of the number of officers compared to the population of the city for the leanest among all the major cities. Just by comparison, Baltimore is about 19,000 more residents, I think, than us. They have 2,000 or 3,000 officers. We're going to be under 900 now, between the budget cuts and then the directed cuts to positions and programs, and then the budget cuts on top of all of that mean that we're going to have to hold positions vacant just to make ends meet, and then some really big spending restrictions. So in terms of the impact that we anticipate that having on police service in the city, we're still trying to figure out what police service looks like. In the wake of all of that, we were already having a very big problem with demand for police service versus our ability to meet that demand, and we have for a few years now seen call response times creeping up and up. You know, our goal as set by City Council for the highest priority call response times is 5 minutes. The numbers I'm seeing for those call response times now on average are creeping up into the 8-minute mark and beyond. And then call response times for lower priority calls are gonna go through the roof. I'm just gonna tell you that right now, because we have to prioritize the immediate life safety calls. So your burglary report may wait hours or longer in the future. It is what it is. We'll deal with it. We'll do the best that we can with the resources that we have. But it means that we're going to have to look at some reductions that we've always tried to avoid. You know, if we were an agency that had a lot of extra in the budget, this would have been a lot easier to absorb. And you see some of these other agencies nationwide that are taking really big budget cuts, but they've also been funded really well over a really long time. That's not our story. We have been really, really lean for a really long time, and we've had successive years of budget cuts or years of budget stability where there aren't ads, much more than the years that we've added in the last, say, 15, 20 years. And so the net effect of all of this is that we're gonna experience some challenges in providing police service in terms of follow-up, any kind of special programs. We're still in the process of trying to figure out if we can maintain our neighborhood response teams. We will probably try to maintain some form of neighborhood response team at each precinct because of the return that we get on that investment. If they can go out and take care of a chronic problem location that's generating a lot of calls, that reduces that demand for service elsewhere. But we're going to have to make some tough decisions over the next year. We are trying to avoid layoffs at this point. I think we're going to be able to. We're still just trying to figure out all of the implications of a really significant cut to an already not quite adequate budget. So that's that. The other big thing that's taxing us, our resources right now, is we're in about week 6 of some unprecedented civil unrest that has been happening in downtown Portland. I don't know how much people have followed that. We've got a lot on our website that documents some of the activity that we've seen, but I mean, just to be real about it, every night pretty much since May 29th, our officers have come under attack in either downtown Portland or a couple of events up in North Portland. At one point at North Precinct on June 25th, a group of people, and you'll notice that I'm not going to call them protesters because this isn't protesting. It has nothing to do with protesting or social justice or any of that. This is something else entirely. But a group of people showed up at North Precinct at MLK and Killingsworth. We heard in the crowd people trying to get people together and saying the plan was to barricade the doors shut and try to burn the building down, and that's exactly what they did. They barricaded doors shut with lumber and screws drilled into the walls with a drill. The officers inside could hear them drilling screws into these boards to barricade these doors shut. We have pictures of all of this available online. And then they lit a dumpster on fire full of flammable materials and rolled it up to the north end of that building where Mid-K, there's some businesses in that building as well where Mid-K is, and tried to light the building on fire. Unfortunately, we were able to get that.
Couldn't stop them before they did all the...
Because it was a crowd of a couple hundred people, and every time officers engaged with them, they had built barricades in the street. Every time officers even got close to them, they attacked with thrown objects, and it was just not possible to break that group up with the resources that we had in place.
Is there a reason they don't use water cannons?
We've never used water cannons in crowd events, really, because that's ever since the 60s, and a lot of the images of fire hoses being used on civil rights protesters, that's just not something that is seen as acceptable anywhere in our profession these days. You won't see that in the United States. You'll see it in some European countries.
Well, that's why you use rubber bullets and tear gas, but you can't use water cannons.
No.
Or dogs.
Or dogs. And you wouldn't want to use dogs.
No, I wouldn't use a dog.
In one of those events, because that's not what those dogs are trained for, and that's not good for anybody.
Yeah.
And water cannons aren't any better than some of the other tools that are available, really, to deal with the problem.
I
But
think once they'd be wet and cold, they'd go home.
yeah, I've always kind of wondered about water sprinklers, but we've got pretty hardy demonstrators here in Portland,
yes,
and they show up in rain or shine, right? I mean, we're Oregonians, so it's getting us wet at the turf. Any of us, really, right? But in all seriousness, it has been a really trying time, and I won't go on and on about all of that activity, because there's lots of information that's available for you out there if you want to see what's been happening. But I will say that one of our next big challenges will be rehabilitating the organization after 6 weeks of some really just inhuman treatment of some of our employees. The things that were spray painted on the walls at North Precinct, you can read for yourself. It's all documented history. It wasn't about social justice, we'll just put it that way. It was about killing police officers. That's what we're seeing spray painted all over downtown right now. And I'll ask this group the same question I ask everybody else that I've been talking to about this, and then we'll move on. But we as Portlanders have a decision to make. If we're going to allow that kind of behavior to go on, is that consistent with our values? Because I don't think so. I'm pretty sure it's not.
No.
And this is spearheaded by a group of about 250 pretty hardcore agitators that will take any group of people they can get with them and try and direct that group to attack the Justice Center. Lately they've taken to attacking the federal courthouse downtown. But that's 250 people. The biggest one of these violent groups that we've encountered so far is maybe a little over 1,500. This city has 640,000 people in it. I think there's a lot more of us who don't think that's okay than there are people who think it is. So where you can help us right now is if you have opinions about that, you have the same First Amendment rights as everyone else, and I would encourage you to share those opinions.
I'd like to tell you firsthand that I appreciate everything you guys do.
Absolutely.
And we want you to know that. We live a lot of this in Lents, day to day.
Yeah.
But when it comes to life-saving, I can't believe that you don't have more support when people are drilling into your doors and you're having to sit in there. That's just wild to me. It's so foreign from what we know Portland to be. So
not all these people are from Portland either.
Right, but I appreciate what you guys do. I want you to
Thank
know
you.
that.
You're worth it.
So is there any way they can sit down to what do they want, and is there a leader?
Is there any reasoning on them?
No. How do you break this? Through mediation? Is it down. I mean, is there a leader? Is there one or two that you know, a handful of people that you know, sit down with the church leaders and sit down and mediate? And what do they want? Because this can't go on. I agree.
Well, after the North Precinct incident, a group of faith leaders from the neighborhood and from the neighborhood surrounding that got together and had an event right next to where they lit the fire. And that's posted online too, and some of the strong words that some of our faith leaders in that community had for the organizers of this violence were pretty powerful. So there is no mediating. And I want to...
Wait. I watched a video of a Salem police officer mediating with white supremacists. And they were armed at the moment. So people are mediating. They're coordinating. So now, if there's a core of bad guys, those are the folks who are focusing, right?
Yeah.
If all your violence is coming from being motivated by a certain people, those are the ones you identify and go after. Right. But the hardcore problem that exists is the cycle of violence. And it really doesn't matter if it's righteous or not. The more violence, the more it adds to more violence. So as long as we've got armed men running around, whoever they are, why ever they are, if they're heroes or scoundrels, they're causing violence, they're adding to the problem. So we need peace officers. We don't need paramilitaries. Or at least we don't need as many. Right? I think the problem with the cop in the school, not so much the cop, it's the gun on his hip. Right? That doesn't need to be in the school. Right? If you're a prison guard, you don't carry a gun. Why do you carry it in the school? Why did you come here today with one?
I can answer that question for you.
Well, he might be working.
Well, I am too, but one of the big reasons why is that we are in a country with something like 200 or 300 million guns just floating around in circulation.
Right.
And
but
unfortunately,
how many for you? I was in the military. I was sometimes deployed in conflict areas. Sometimes I was given a sidearm. Many times I wasn't. Right?
So how do I know when I'm going to need one?
Well, you're in a community group, so we're hoping that there's
I
Well, yeah, I'm not worried about anybody here. No,
it's a fundamental right to have
and I didn't want to be
it's
accusatory, but you're talking about we have to rethink how we're doing it.
Yeah.
Think, why did you come here with a gun?
Yeah, and the reason why is that
side.
because I am a police officer.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
Because any minute now I could
officers that don't carry guns
find myself around the world, yes, in countries and in countries where guns are much more tightly regulated than in this one. And that is the eternal problem. And I'm not going to get into the whole gun control thing because that's really bad at parties. But
I like the line of argument.
We come from Richmond, California.
You ever heard of Richmond, California?
I sure have.
They put in what do you call
shot spotter.
Do you
Yeah.
have those here in
We don't. We looked at that a while back, but it is really, really expensive, and we don't have that much
Well, I know we
money.
don't have money right now, but I'm just saying.
But even before, when we looked at it, yeah, it's millions of dollars. And what has happened with gun violence in the city is it used to be concentrated in a few different areas of the city, and as some neighborhoods have gentrified, and some neighborhoods that as Portland has just grown and changed, and those few different spots in the city, other than downtown, there's always been a hot spot for gun violence in downtown. That's still there, but the rest of it has just kind of scattered. And if you look at heat maps of gun violence from like the 90s and the early 2000s, you can see these denser concentrations, and now it's just like
everywhere,
like ball bearings on a linoleum floor, right? It's everywhere.
Everywhere.
When I call 911, I want an officer with a gun, and I don't care if he's got 4.
Well,
The more
now,
guns
911
the officer has in his possession when he pulls up in front of my house, the happier I am.
But I don't think
We would prefer they carry no more than 2,
I
actually,
know,
by our
but-
policy. Just saying.
I could probably round a few more up for you. I can put the word out on the street, and I can find more.
Yes, sir.
Given the recent problems that we've had, and I'll use the word problems lightly, here in Portland, what kind of early retirement are you seeing requests come in?
So we are seeing. We're seeing a little bit of that. Where we've actually seen it the most in the last couple of months is in our chief's office. So I just had an assistant chief with less time on the bureau than me leave to go be the chief of police in Boise, Idaho. I've got another assistant chief who is leaving next month to go be the chief in Bend, which I'm jealous, but so in the police bureau, everyone hired before January 1 of 2007 is in the FPD&R retirement system. It's our own fire and police retirement system. That's sunsetted. And so what we're worried about is everybody after that is in PERS. So now we've just had these huge budget cuts, 6 weeks of really nasty civil unrest directed at the police, and I have all these police officers with portable pensions who could go be police officers someplace else and keep. I'm stuck here, right? Because I'm an FPD&R person. So well, I shouldn't say I'm stuck here because I really like working here, but you're stuck with me because my pension isn't portable, but we do have a large percentage of the organization that is, and we're worried about that. I have heard that we've got people in backgrounds at other agencies. The one thing we got going for us is that the rest of Oregon law enforcement is mostly smaller agencies, and so there just aren't enough vacancies to handle 600 or 800 of us. But that is an issue that we're concerned
So how many would you say are
about.
in that category?
It's hard to say because usually people don't tell us.
Oh.
They just show up one day with, a separation form and 2 weeks notice and say, all right, I'm done. Like I just got one of those today. Came completely out of the blue. Police officer with about maybe 8 or 10 years on. I'm done. It's a big organization, so one here and there isn't going to kill us. But yeah, that scares me a little bit.
Right. And a follow-up, if I could, and then a comment afterwards. If you see a spike in movement away from the agency, would you be able to backfill those positions with your former transit officers?
Well, we had so many vacant positions already that we'll be able to backfill currently vacant positions with transit officers. So yeah, we won't lose any of them. But between the directed cuts and then just general cuts, I'm still going to have to hold some number of mostly sworn positions, although we have a lot of non-sworn positions we're going to hold vacant too, just to make ends meet for 2020-21. And it's going to be tight.
And my comment as well, I'm in the North Precinct. I'm in Park Rose, and for those of you who know where Park Rose is, it's almost out in Gresham. And we're in the North Precinct because we're on the other side of I-84. So we fall into that. And we have our scanners on all the time, and we heard that night. And it was painful to listen to. And if you don't hear it enough, we appreciate the job that you do. And if it were at all possible for us to come out and support you, live support you, we would have, because we listened to that, and that was hard to hear.
Yes, ma'am.
He's been raising his hand.
Oh yeah, sorry.
So I'm glad to hear that you're going
Hey
to...
Ed, where are you over there? We can't hear you.
Well, I'm social distancing.
There's a mic over here. You want me to get you the mic?
That's all right. No. So I'm glad to hear that you're really looking hard at trying to keep the neighborhood response team, or some part of it. Because where I work at the city, we rely and depend on neighborhood response team a lot. Plus, they're very beneficial to the neighborhoods. But the other question I have is, I'm curious, has your intelligence your intelligence shown, like, is this Antifa, these 250 hardcore people that are doing the rioting every night and attacking police and monuments and buildings, especially the ones coming from outside of Portland? What's your intelligence showing, and where is this group? Someone was asking if there's organized leaders, which, I mean, I hear, Antifa, so I'm curious about that. And then also, how are they going to fund all this overtime if they cut your budget? Did I hear like $7 million in overtime?
Yeah.
Where's that coming from?
So maybe I'll go in reverse order.
Sure.
We were the one tiny little bit of good news out of all of this stuff is most of that $7 million actually ended up being in the fiscal year that ended on July 1. So we scrimped and saved, and we canceled a lot of expensive projects, and I haven't seen the numbers yet, but it looks like we probably came in about like $1.83 under budget last year, but we actually managed to fit it all within our budget, I think. Don't quote me on that yet, because they're still adding it all up back at the Justice Center. But going forward, every $1 million worth of overtime that we spend is going to have to come out of someplace, and so we'll either end up in the position of City Council needing to find that money someplace when the whole city's budget is shrinking because of COVID and the impact on the city budget. Or it's going to have to come from somewhere, which is one of the reasons why, the big reason why we need to stop having this activity is because we need this to end before somebody gets killed. You can only launch mortar-sized fireworks at people for so long before one of them blows somebody up. But now, for your other question, it's complicated. Antifa, first of all, is a really loaded term because it means a lot of different things to a lot of people. It is associated a lot of times with anarchism, and Antifa and anarchists are sort of related, but by nature, anarchists don't believe in any kind of leaders, or they believe that in kind of small group and they're like an amoeba. It's really hard to pin down and say this person is the leader of Antifa. What I can tell you is that whatever it's called, there are anarchist groups in just about every major city in the United States. They are not, as far as we know, centrally led from somewhere above all of them, but these groups somehow have popped up all over the United States, and yes, we have them here in Portland. We've actually had them here in Portland for a really long time. And anarchists aren't new, right? I mean, President McKinley got assassinated by an anarchist in 1901.
They've always been on the outlying of all these demonstrations for decades.
Yeah.
You wait until the end of the demonstration, and then they go around and do whatever they were going to do. And that hasn't changed, but they just seem to have gotten strong.
Yeah, and when we base a lot of our crowd management tactics and policies actually on crowd science. We have been blessed, actually, the chief that we just lost to Boise is one of the foremost experts in at least the United States and maybe in the world on crowd policing. Public order policing is what we call it now. We used to call it crowd management and crowd control, and apparently those are old terms now. But what the objective is of whatever you want to call it, and I'll get in trouble no matter what I call them. I'm already hearing about how you can't call them agitators and you can't call them anarchists, but whatever they are, their objective is at one of these deals, if you can get a big crowd of people together, whyever they're there, but if you've got a big crowd of people there, and you can see this happen in things that aren't protests, like sporting events, celebrations. There's a great video, if you can find it, of Vancouver, BC. They had the hockey team won the championship or something, and I think that came in the 90s, and there's a big celebratory crowd in the street. Crowd science, it's a fascinating science, but what the objective of whatever you want to call these people So you get the crowd together, and then you want to get people to go from being individual identifiers, like we all are on a daily basis, to become collective identifiers. We want to try and bring that crowd together as a collective identified group, and then direct it at whatever your objective is. In most cases, lately the Justice Center. And some of the things that you'll see in those situations that are telltale signs, one of the big ones is fire. You'll see fires start to get set, and that right there, anytime you see fires getting set in a big crowd of people, that's a turning point in your event right there, and you are headed for trouble. If you look back at video, you'll see fire almost every night getting set. The elk getting burned up every night, that's the purpose of that. If there's something primal about fire that just gets people out of their heads and identifying in this more collective way, and then you see what we heard from the crowd at North Precinct. Come on, everybody, let's go nail the door shut and burn the building down. And that's what they go and do. It's more complicated than that, but you can watch it happen. And as a geek like me, it has been fascinating to step back a little bit and watch the crowd science in action night after night after night. And so the great question is, who's doing that, right?
Right. So follow-up question. So what support do you have from the commissioner in charge and city council for stopping this? I'm really glad we didn't get to the point of like Seattle and have the truck zone. But what? Isn't there a plan? I mean, I know the community's asking for something to be done to stop this rioting every night and destruction every night. So, support from council?
Wow, all right, this is... So, that's all right, this is my job to answer people's questions, right? Actually, just to be real about it, the mayor has been pretty supportive of us. And especially in the last week or so, on the public communications front, we kind of realized that a lot of the world just didn't realize what was actually happening. And so that's where we're trying to make an effort, and really that's being led by the mayor's office on just put it out there, what's actually going on. And so I'm going to give credit where it's due. I know the mayor takes a lot of shots, but he's been pretty supportive of us. There have been some statements made, probably well-meaning, that aren't necessarily always completely informed by fact, that have not been helpful. And then just, one thing we still would really like to see, and that, I've certainly been advocating for the last 6 weeks, is just a really clear, concise message. Again, about what I said earlier. There is no possible way that this stuff is consistent with our values as a city or as a community. Somebody other than the police saying that really helps in a time like this, because of course we're going to come out and say this is a really bad idea for this to happen, right? That's where we need some help, is with some support of the police. It's just supporting the police is not exactly fashionable right now, and it's not necessarily seen as carrying a lot of political benefit. How'd I do?
So that's Shar and David's job?
Yes, that's our job. We have emailed them, and I don't know if it's gone on deaf ears or not, Ed, because I never get a response.
With them removing officers from transit, and is TriMet looking into security? Or?
They are, yeah. Yeah, they got their
Because
own.
I will not ride it without some sort of security.
I thought the plan at one point, they were looking at the sheriff's office taking that over, but now I'm not sure that's going to happen. And so I'm not sure exactly what TriMet is doing, but TriMet, I think there are some rules that TriMet has for a lot of the federal funding that they get about like maintaining public safety on the system, so they'll have to do something. I'm not sure exactly what they're going to do.
Well, what's the difference between the sheriff's office doing it and the police force doing it?
Color of the uniform.
Not much.
Okay,
Who pays them and who directs them?
Station, there's some kind of guy that's parked there, and some kind of security. Do you know what It's a.
He's an unarmed.
He's an
guy.
unarmed. There's a car there, and he's there. You know.
Are you talking about the Max?
Yeah, down on the Max.
Yeah.
Oh,
he's just protecting the porta potty.
Yeah, he guards the outhouse
He's
for the
guarding
bus
the outhouse.
drivers.
No, seriously.
Seriously,
that's
that's
really
all he's there for.
Yeah, that's doing. He's guarding the outhouse.
I'm sure.
No, that's a job you want.
That's all he does.
That's a safe place to be.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I'm from Chicago, so the police presence here is like a whole other world compared to what I would deal with in Chicago, where it was way more people there, you know. But like, what's the process to become a police officer? So I'm going through an electrical apprenticeship right now, so it's like a 5-year training, 5 years of school, and 10,000 hours on the job. And like, what are the criteria to become a?
So, in a nutshell, to be a police officer, first you have to make it through our hiring process. There's you know, like any job, you fill out an application, and we have a written test that we have you do that's online. After that, there's a physical agility test, and if you're in reasonably good shape, it's you can pass it. It's nothing earth-shattering. And then there is a really extensive background process. We don't use polygraph for pre-employment testing in Oregon. It's illegal. So instead of that, a lot of other states do. So instead of that, we do a really extensive background where, you know, we'll go so far as to ask you for 12 different people who know you well enough to submit their names. We'll interview them, and then we'll ask them for 3 references who know you, and then we'll talk to them, and then we'll ask, and we'll keep asking in layers until we start to hear names that we've already interviewed, basically. So we try to find your whole network of people, and then all kinds of other stuff. There are some standards to begin with. You can't, you know, you have to be at least 21. You can't be a convicted felon. You can't have been dishonorably discharged from the military. We have some drug use standards that we don't publicize, because then people know what to tell us when the last time was they used different kinds of drugs. And then, so we put your background together, and then if you pass all of that, then we'll bring you in for an interview with a command panel and a community member. Ask you a lot of questions to see if you're the kind of person that we're looking for, and then we'll make you a conditional job offer. From there, you'll go to a medical exam. It's just like a checkup, and then we send you to our psychologist. And our psychologist sits down with your background packet and looks at all of your background and your history, as we have found out what it is. They administer a couple of different psychological inventories, and they use those to figure out where you fit on a number of job-related dimensions. And we're looking to screen out people with like overly aggressive tendencies, or people, any kind of racial or ethnic biases, or people who are either too assertive or not assertive enough, all those kind of qualities. And then if you pass that, we hire you. Then begins your 18-month training period. And so we send you down to the State Police Academy in Salem for 16 weeks, and you're there with officers from all over the state. And that's the state's basic peace officers course, and that's where you get your state certification. After that, you come back for a 10-week advanced academy with our training division out at the training facility on Airport Way. And that's more Portland-specific training, and that runs the gamut. Everything from, you know, the basic manipulation of tools, and, you know, how to drive emergency vehicles to, what's it by? Sorry. The point is, it's a really long process. It takes 18 months after you get hired.
Do you feel like continuing education, or you guys should have more? Like, do you want more? Like,
yeah. Yeah. You could get me going for a long time on that topic, but suffice it to say, I'm an advocate of the European system, where it's like you go to college to be a police officer.
Yeah.
I'd like to see us establish a policing college in this country. I think that would help us a lot.
I've just heard there's a high turnover rate.
It's not as bad here. Some other places have it worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're better off.
Yeah,
there.
We pay pretty well, so that helps us.
My uncle and cousin are detectives in Chicago, so I hear some crazy stories.
Bet. That's a.
Thanks for coming out, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Please support me. You know the rest of them don't.
Hey, I know. Thank you.
We're having some difficulty hearing questions, so we're going to need to pass that mic around when you're wanting to ask questions. So we've got a bottle of stuff here someplace. Where'd it go? There it is.
Oh, we've got Clorox wipes, and we've got hand sanitizer, and we've got it all.
We can pass the mic and the hand sanitizer. Anyone who wants to ask a question as soon as we let Tremaine talk.
Am I ready to go?
You're ready to go. Yes, you are.
There's a lot of calls right
Good evening, everyone. I'm Tremaine Clayton, the Portland Fire Department Community Healthcare Assessment Team Coordinator for Portland Street Response. I do recognize some faces. I was out here recently talking about our pilot program that COVID specifically has not been started. But we do have some updates. The updates are that our RFP process of the actual mental health provider that we were seeking, we've been able to complete that. That's in the final review process with the Commissioner's Office. Myself, personally, I've been working on policies and procedures to have our protocols ready to roll out. I was going to say fortunately I had someone helping, but they were on light duty, so not fortunate they were hurt. But fortunate for me, they were very community health focused in the very beginning. And so I was able to pull them into the office to help me with some of those policies and procedures. So it wasn't just myself looking at these documents over and over and over. So we actually got to vet a lot of those, and those are going through the review process. And after the civil unrest, our commissioner was reallocating funds, and they have directed $4.8 million to the Portland Street Response project. So we went from $500,000 to almost $5 million to try to get this community-led process going. Civil unrest definitely has our hands tied a little bit as well. Again, the officers there were pretty clear about the budget process, so I don't want to go into that. We both work for the same city, same bosses, same money that we've been working through. So as that's been reallocated, the funds are coming to us. What that means, what that looks like, is the potential for expansion a lot quicker than we had planned. However, we thought it would be great to just get 6 teams out there ready to go. But we didn't want to forget that this is a pilot and that we're really trying to study it to make sure that we're doing it right. So we didn't want to just say, yes, we have the money, let's go 6 teams, and then fail. So we're still going with the 1 team to start, and then we're going to have our 3, 6, 9 month and year check-ins. And the potential is that we'd like to add teams, depending on where the data says, kind of in those marks. So ideally, we're going to add a 2nd team probably in the 3 to 6 month mark, and that is to extend service hours. So right now, it's just going to be myself and the mental health provider, and we'll be working a 40-hour work week. But by adding that 2nd team, the idea is that we would overlap within the week so we can provide the service 7 days a week instead of just the regular business week. And then as we implement those teams, the additional teams, we would then maybe consider shifts so that we can ultimately get to a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week program. So those are the big major updates. Like I said, everything really was slowed down due to COVID. We thought that we would have that RFP posted and ready to hire people pretty much that same week they said we're going to shut the city down. So that really put a halt to everything. But like I said, we've been working real hard on the policies, procedures, so that when we're able to, this lifts and we can hire someone, we'll be ready to hit the ground with our training. We've been looking at the training, seeing what we can kind of cut. Some of the stuff as we were looking at it was really great input from the community, but it was actually more than we needed. So rather than sitting in a classroom for a year, we're looking at what programs we can do with the training that I've already received. The mental health provider should be coming in with training. That's why we've we're looking to hire it that way. So that really it's just going to be kind of organizational, Portland-specific procedures in terms of the response. The last group I haven't mentioned is BOEC, our dispatchers. They also have to do some of the training, and again, with COVID and the civil unrest, they're just not seeing how they can get that training up and going. But again, we're working with them right now to see how we can get that training up and going. That's really the brief updates to the program. If there's anyone here that doesn't know entirely what Portland Street Response is, if you missed the first presentation, I'd be happy to discuss and just for the sake of time, just open it up to any questions this way.
Well, I have a question for you. Is this working?
Yep.
Yes. You haven't hired the social worker yet. I'm assuming you must have a stack of resumes by now, right?
There's a lot of people that have called personally for or emailed for interest,
right?
But the actual RFP hasn't been posted to actually receive those yet.
Okay. Well, we met a gal down here on Flavel, or Knapp actually, that's an unarmed police officer. How many of those do we have in the city? Do you know?
No.
Because it's not part of the street response.
No. From the Fire Bureau perspective, the only officers the Fire Bureau employs would be our arson investigators.
Okay.
They are technically dual sworn Portland police officers for the investigative and arresting authority, but they are sworn firefighters by contract, by entry. They swore to be a firefighter, and then they have that police.
So that wouldn't be one of these that are unarmed?
No, that wouldn't be us. It could potentially, might be, well, no, because that's a different function. I know the police had a program, it was called the PS3, safety, I can't remember.
Right.
PS3, it always has me thinking about video games. So I was like, sign me up. But they were basically, when we're talking about potential for police cuts, that was one of the first programs that I thought, because it's a smaller program people don't really know about, if they were to cut those folks, I would love to scoop them up, because they already have the police side training in terms of some of the low-level criminal activity. They'd be able to do those reports, and they would have that kind of background already. So that's my way of seeing, like, if our brothers and sisters in arms are cut, how could we maybe absorb some of that for just continuity?
Well, this is not coming from me, but Tiffany from the west side called me today. She lives over at Goose Hollow. She said, well, when you see Tremaine, tell them we need it started over there. I said, well, they did all their research downtown and decided to stick it out here.
Yeah. Goose Hollow, I guess that would be close enough to downtown, and that really is because we're going to start with the one team. Two things. BOEC would be overwhelmed with all the resources they would have to figure out down there. Because really what we're doing is looking at what's going on now and saying that sounds like street response. And pulling that out and going here. To do that downtown, that's already overwhelming downtown. And then as a responder, having worked at Rescue 1, I was averaging 13 calls a shift, and that usually started at 4 o'clock at night, and I didn't sleep.
Yeah.
And so to think that I would be doing that for street response downtown, I personally, that it wouldn't.
Well, I'll just tell you would have been overwhelmed and you couldn't handle it.
That's the short answer. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Now, how many folks like you would it take to take that duty away from cops? The sort of incidents that you respond to. How many folks would it take for you to take that load completely away from the police department?
Hopefully we'll find that out with our data from this pilot. We're using Cahoots as a model, and I believe they have 3 vans running to maintain their hours, and pretty much the hours that we're looking not to run, which is going to be probably that 2 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the morning, that's when the calls for service are at their lowest. And so to just look at Eugene, at their population, to look at our population and just do quick math, probably 8 teams, but that's me being very optimistic and trying to ask for 8 teams. But really it's just going to be the statistics at the end of the study to determine what that really will look like, because like I said, right now we're looking at 4 call types just from the Fire Bureau side that we would redirect to Portland Street Response. Whereas on the police side, we don't have a specific call volume, we have criteria. Because, like, for example, for a police officer welfare check, that could be probably 6 different scenarios, and maybe one of them is where a fire department would go as well. And so trying to tease that out, we just figured these scenarios, if someone were to report someone's outside yelling, and they don't seem like they're really connected or engaging with anybody, they're just out frantic, that would be a police welfare check. That's something Portland Street Response could do. But if it was a welfare check for a possible broken-in vehicle, there's a criminality aspect to that. That's not going to be Portland Street Response. And trying to tease all that out, because that, like I said, that one call type could be 6 different things. We can't guess which ones we would be on to make the assumption of how many teams we need until we're actually doing it and have that. We can really vet out this call type specifically. We can say it's Portland Street Response.
What I noticed is how much time you spend with those people. We used to have some officers that come up here to deal with a gal, Becky, that was living on our hill up here, and they would spend hours with her.
Yeah, and that's really the concept behind this work, is that our EOPS crews, the trucks, engines, 2-person rescues, the emergency responders, if we get there and there's no true emergency, we need to be in service. So when there is one, that's not to say that this moment is not an emergency for that individual, and that's what we're hoping to do, is to say this individual needs these services. I can take an hour to help make that happen so the EOPS can be readily available. You're making this too easy.
I know. No more questions? Really?
I'm excited. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I'm ready too. I'm ready too.
What's your crystal ball say?
My crystal ball says the conversation I had today sounds like week-wise with the process of hiring. For that to do its due course and then the training, I'm trying to cut it to say fall. But they told me if you say January, February, that would be realistic. But that's also, they gave me the tongue-in-cheek, there's a second wave of this epidemic going on. So I'm at the point where I said, though, today, I'm like, if January you're telling me I'm not ready, I'm going to find a way to roll. I really, that's been the hardest thing, I think, is one, when I wasn't going to work, working from home, but 2, doing all the policies and procedures as much as they're needed. I'm not out in the community doing that hands-on work, and that's really where I feel is my niche. I'm not an administrator. Check my emails. I'm not very good. I would get back to you, unlike the other city requests, but it's not going to be quick and it's going to be sloppy.
Any more questions?
No more questions.
All right.
No questions.
Thank you.
It's going to be up here, guys. We're going to see you around. We're going to be calling, right?
Yep.
911's going to be all up on what to do.
All right, so it's my turn. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
So, can you raise your hand if you don't know anything about the Bybee Lakes Hope Center? Okay. You weren't here at the February time? Okay. So I'm going to give you like a 2-minute. Okay.
I can study up.
You can study up? All right, then if I can catch you later to give you a little bit of a rundown if you'd like. I just wanted to get a sense for how much background you all would like. It sounds like everybody kind of heard me in February, so I'll just start with updates since then. COVID waylaid us just like everybody else. We have 11 existing facilities for the homeless in 4 counties, so trying to figure out how to lead group living safely was a bit of a bear, to be honest. We are very blessed. We had 8 participants who were tested, and we have had 0 positives. So we're really, really lucky. We had to stop accepting new referrals in the beginning until the Oregon Health Authority could figure out what kind of screening protocols we were allowed to put in place to help people determine whether or not they were safe to come in. As we know, with this virus, being asymptomatic is a thing. So not showing any symptoms and still carrying the virus and coming into a group living situation, that has the potential to be dangerous. And when we have up to 58 people in one building, that has the potential to be really dangerous. And so we have been taking referrals again, and we've been moving forward. We've got protocols that have been in place, and like I said, we haven't had any positives. So that's what's really great, is we're going to be moving into opening the Ivy Lakes Hope Center with already tested COVID protocols. So that is something I want to reassure you we've been taking into consideration and making sure we have plans in place so that we can move forward safely. So on the project management side, I've got some really great news that I'll start with because I'm too excited not to share it at the beginning. Last week on June 30th, Governor Brown signed House Bill 4212, and it did a whole lot of other things. I'm not a politician, so the part that I care about is that it redefined what an emergency shelter is to the state of Oregon. So previously, a program like ours that provides basic needs but also additional services like case management and requiring volunteer hours and that sort of program did not qualify by the state of Oregon as an emergency shelter. So even though we're serving hundreds of homeless people, we still were not eligible for any of the rules that helped to make operations easier, and we weren't eligible for any state funding in certain categories. So with that change, one of the things that it does is make it so that emergency shelters, which our program and all others in the state that provide wraparound services for the homeless, now qualify for different land use laws. So we do not have to pass a zoning check in order to open a homeless shelter to serve the homeless in this COVID crisis. And so the state level now says you don't need zoning. So we had been working toward the end of May with Mayor Wheeler. He's very supportive of the Ivy Lakes Hope Center, and we were working with City Council to get on their agenda so that they could give us permission to operate. We don't need that anymore, and they're a little busy right now. So we have just said, see you later. So we're not going through City Council. We're not required to. We've been working with BDS, the Bureau of Development Services, through the City of Portland, and they came out and did a walkthrough with us. And it's very interesting in COVID times to try to get groups of people into the building to assess things, but we were able to do that, and they are really excited to give us big thumbs up. So they say that we have more emergency exits than we need, we have more toilets than we need, we have more showers than we need. They just want us to put a little bit of panic hardware here and there, and then we're good to go. So our architects have all of our permits submitted now to the city, and they're under review. We should have the first of the 3 permits that we submitted approved this week, which is our demolition permit, and so next week we'll be starting to swing hammers. We're doing a lot of demolition of some of the areas like visitation with the phones across the glass. We don't need that, so we're going to have a big, beautiful lobby that lets in lots of natural light instead. So we're getting started on demolition. The electricians are working. I do want to share, we haven't publicly talked about it very much, but we did have a theft and vandalism incident at the Hope Center. It was actually right after we signed the lease, which stipulates that it is our responsibility and not Harsh Investment Properties' responsibility. And so unfortunately it was hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of damage that was done. They broke into the property and basically gutted our transformer and our generator and some rooftop HVAC units. So they hauled out a whole lot of copper. And I never thought I'd be trying to keep people out of a non-jail, but it is what it is. So we've gotten creative with some security measures, and we haven't had any further incidents, but we're still working with an insurance claim to try to get those repairs done. So that has been a bit of a adventure, to be honest. And we're just really grateful that we haven't had any further incidents so that we don't have to continue to have those kinds of headaches. So with COVID, there was an article published, I believe, by former Governor Kulongoski that was recommending the use of what he called Wapato at the time. I sent him an email letting him know he owed us $5 for that swear word. So he was suggesting that they use the property for overflow hospital beds. And so we let Oregon Emergency Management know that we were open to that. So just call us and let us know if you need it. It's vacant. It's just sitting here, so if your hospitals are overwhelmed, call us and we'll talk. They haven't needed us, so that's really great. And so we've just been moving forward on our general operations plan until they tap us in. So That being said, it's impossible to drive down the streets in Portland right now and not see the overwhelming number of tents that are popping up. We were having a conversation before we started tonight about how it's really difficult to even walk down the sidewalk in downtown Portland these days. Even 3 months ago, you could still walk down the sidewalk. And so because of that, we are going to be, this is one of the first times we're publicly announcing this, we are going to be opening in September. Super excited. Not the whole building. We're going to be opening 3 dorms for emergency shelter in September, and that will be 72 beds to get people in the door. That is at about 48% capacity of those dorms for COVID spacing. So we're putting 24 people in an area that was designed for 50 to keep people apart, and we'll continue to operate with our normal COVID protocols that are working really well in our group housing.
People coming out of the current shelter system, or where are they coming from?
We will be training referring partners who will refer people to us who are appropriate for our programs. And so they'll be coming off the streets. They'll be coming from other shelter, like lower barrier shelters that don't offer wraparound services.
Right.
That maybe they're ready for a program to help them regain some self-sufficiency. So that will be our main method, is working with people that are already serving the homeless here so that they can help us identify the people that are really ready to make life change.
We have a lot of referrals.
Yeah, so that'll be 72 beds open in September. We're pushing really hard for that. It was the look on our architect's face and our general contractor's face when I said, okay, so remember how I said end of October? What do you think about September 1st? They were like, that sounds like 2 months sooner than you promised. But they went to the drawing board and figured out how we could split the building in a way that we would be able to offer essential services for people and open that emergency shelter while still walling off the sections that they would need to do the major construction in. So they are totally switching gears from being total ownership of the building and then give us the keys in several months to now they're going to be working a construction site with at least 100 people with staff included that are living and working in that area. Go ahead.
Hi, did you have facilities for people in their vans or, the motorhomes that you have them on 92nd, you have them on Foster?
They're parked everywhere, I agree. So we do not have enough parking there to be able to support a program like that. Mm-hmm. It's not what we do. We've had a lot of people call us and say, well, you have 2 parking lots. Well, yes, we do have 2 parking lots, but many of our participants have vehicles, and we're going to have a whole lot of staff and a whole lot of volunteers that are going to need to park there as well. And so we are not going to be able to offer parking to folks that are not enrolled in our program. Part of it is that we are insured for our program with our safeguards in place, and so having mass housing and having liability coverage for people that are maybe not enrolled in our program, maybe not following the same sobriety rules on our sober campuses, it does not protect the sobriety to people that are living with us if they can walk out into the parking lot and have somebody be using right there. And that is what happens in a lot of the tent camps and in some of the RV camp group pods. I don't know what they call them.
Is there any plans for people with the RV thing? I saw today the guy pulls out his barbecue and it's dry. It's, he's right there on the sidewalk over there by the, this is on Foster and 90 and 110.
Yeah, we don't have any plans for that. That's not what we do. It's not a program that we offer. We try to kind of stay in our own lane because we know we're not trying to solve every single homeless person's problem. We are only going to have a few hundred beds, and there's over 4,000 homeless people before COVID in the Portland area. So we really try to stay in our lane and focus on the populations that we have a strong track record of knowing how to help them reach self-sufficiency. And we are willing to help try to be a part of the solution in other ways with other partners, but that's just not one of them that we can safely do on site. So, Dave?
I was going to say, that's Tremaine's fire, huh?
Actually, I was going to say there's been churches that are offering safe parking. I don't know if it's under the umbrella or if it's just of any one specific group or if it's just individual churches. But I mean, as a neighborhood association, you could probably talk to the churches just to see. I know it doesn't sound ideal to create that space, but by creating that space, it does help us to look at this area and know what's flammable and not versus on the random street. So it's not probably the ideal, but by having a hard parking lot that's well maintained in terms of their the property around them, that could help with that fire risk. But then again, it's usually just an overnight thing, and then they have to kind of be moving on. So that's just one option.
And there's rules.
There are rules.
And there are rules in our program as well, and many people who are choosing to continue living in a tent instead of entering a shelter. There are some who can't do group living because of PTSD and other things, but many of them are choosing that lifestyle because they don't want to follow the rules in a program like ours. And so that's why we have a referral-only process where you have to go through a local agency and be vetted and make sure that you understand what you're committing to.
Signing up
for a program. Yeah, exactly.
This is exciting, and I want to find out, when you say you're going to accept referrals, what are you referring to? Like what agencies? I mean, is this just coming through the city or private agencies or the jail system, the correctional facility?
Yes. So
and then I have another question, follow-up for you on the RV stuff.
So currently we accept, in our existing facilities, we accept referrals from corrections. We have contracts with them, so anybody that's coming out of the correction system who would be released and would be homeless on release, they instead contract bed space with us because they find that if they go into a structured program like ours, where they're guided in being reintegrated into the community, they have a much greater success rate. They don't end up reoffending, they don't end up relapsing, and they can actually get on their feet. And so we do accept corrections referrals. We accept referrals from community action groups and from other social service agencies, other shelters like warming shelters. We've met with a lot of the local agencies around here, and we've been in email and phone contact with many of them. They know that we're developing a training so that they can come through for a tour and see what we're offering and get their minds wrapped around what our program is like so that they can make accurate referrals. They do things like making sure somebody's ready to be clean and sober. They don't have to have any amount of sobriety. They just have to be sober right now, at least behaviorally sober when they enter the emergency shelter. And then they have to be able to be clean when they enter the reentry program.
Is there a requirement in the justice system that they go to your facility, or is this just voluntary?
There's no requirement.
Okay.
It's offered to them. Our program is never mandatory.
Okay.
Because we want people to actually put their heart into the program.
Well, they can't recover if they don't want to.
Exactly. And so we don't have the capacity to babysit.
Right.
And there are 10 people behind that person who would really like that bed space. And
so my other question comes to the people that are refusing, and we are actually housing them in this neighborhood, and it's become and has been a problem for a long time, but now it's really escalating with COVID. Nobody is wanting to do anything because of COVID. So we're not allowed to do some of the things, but some of the other homeless people, the camps are growing and growing and growing. We now have torn up cars on the streets. We now have boats that are being dumped. We now have people that are cooking in their RVs. They're not being required to go. And honestly, I think that's one of my biggest frustrations here, is that we can't use the parks, the places that we've paid for, because there's no teeth, so to speak, to get these people to go into programs, either get off the street or get into a program. I'm excited for what you're doing. I know people have to be willing and ready, but man, I mean, what can we do? I mean, do you have any suggestions about that?
Well, no, and I think the in between part is the in between part is the fact that there's, when I look at the call types, I break them down into chronic health, mental health, and drug alcohol. Those are three very independent individual issues that oftentimes are coexisting with homelessness. So when we're talking about Raven's program, we're definitely talking about those folks that are just wanting to do what they're going to do because they're not ready to be clean. When I'm talking about someone living in their vehicle coming to a church parking lot, I'm talking about that family who's working multiple jobs but still in under the poverty line and has to live in their vehicle, and that's the only thing that they have. Those are the folks that I'm saying that if we were to engage those folks, those are the folks that they're just down on their luck. And if they had some structure, some stability, that's how we get those folks moving along. And then in my head, if we were able to do that for a month or two, where all the churches said, here's the safe spot, those people that show up, they're going to get those services and hopefully get on their feet. Then when we do the next look, we're seeing those people who just service, what's the word? Where they're basically they're
service resistant.
Service resistant, right? But even that word sometimes gets used inappropriately. I had one client who was service resistant. He had a traumatic brain injury. He didn't remember his appointment. He thought it was at 1. He showed up at 1. No, it was at 11. And so, but he's already, well, last time he didn't do it, and it was already an exception to get him that appointment because he was service resistant. He had a brain injury. He couldn't remember. So that's where it's a little tricky, because all of these, it's real easy to lump it in, because even I've walked down and I see them actively shooting up. I don't want to take my kid down that street, but to think every homeless person I encounter has a drug problem, I would be wrong and I wouldn't be effective. So I guess my 2 cents is just to recognize there are people that this type of a thing would be a good fit, and just not to lose sight of the fact that not everybody out there homeless has mental health issues. They're not all on drugs. Some of them are just down on the luck.
Well, I don't think that, so I don't want you to think that I think that. It's just, I see a big criminal element that is increasing, and it's kind of like what the police are experiencing. It's kind of scary. I mean, you see all these things going on, and you can't go out on the street for fear that something's going to happen. So, I don't know. It's just frustrating.
Other questions? I can keep giving updates. Okay.
Yeah, is there like more things popping up in the works that are kind of like what you're doing already, or
are there more
like programs like what you're working on? Are there more like things like that? Because it's kind of cool that it's happening.
So it is definitely becoming more accepted that this model of offering more than just food, shelter, shower, that model of providing more, of asking why did you end up homeless, and how can we help connect you to resources so that you don't end up there again, that model is becoming much more popular. But there are very, very few of us. So there's another shining example in San Diego, there's one in San Antonio, and then there's us. And so we have 11 facilities right now. This is proving that our model that works really, really, really well with 60 people can work really, really well with several hundred people. And so we believe that we're setting a precedent. We believe that Portland is going to stand as an example to show that we can make a significant difference over time if we invest in social services and co-locate them with housing, so that we can get people off the street and into a location where they can go upstairs to get signed up for ID, they can go upstairs to get a diagnosis, they can go upstairs to go get legal help. So Lewis and Clark Law School is putting together a program so that their student lawyers will come and help people clean up and expunge their records, because that will help them to get employment, that will help them to be able to get an apartment. And so cleaning up their credit score, cleaning up their records, those are basics that people don't even think as barriers. So if you don't offer those services, then you're really not going to help people do more than just survive. And we want to help people get beyond just living today and figure out how to live a year from now.
Hey Raven, have you run into Daniel Hoffman?
I have. I met Daniel at a homelessness listening session that Mayor Wheeler hosted, and we ended up at the same table and had a really great discussion about Bybee Lakes. And then I was going to bring him through for a tour, but then COVID cut our schedule and we haven't reconnected. But I'll probably reach out to him and see if he'd like to come through now that we're starting to take tours through again. I saw his hand first. I'll give that to you next.
Do you have any business cards?
I do have some business cards. Yeah.
Great, I need one.
I just wanted to know, how's the shelter down on 92nd?
The church?
Yeah.
The old church?
Yeah, what's it called?
Family housing.
Yeah.
Are they full?
They're full. I think they're full. I don't know.
I would guess.
Stuart would know. He's more involved with them than we are.
Okay.
I haven't checked with Brandy. I can have her probably up next time.
Yeah, I was just
to see what they're doing.
Wondering, I know they want to do an apartment behind and
right. I think that's a few years down the road, but yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of our major update. If there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. We're having a Helping Hands annual update event, which we always do in May, but it got canceled from COVID. So we decided to convert it to a virtual event. That's going to be August 28th. It's just going to be a 1 hour where we update on all of our facilities, including Bybee Lakes, and we're going to have some of our graduates speak about their experience in our program and what their life was like before and what their life is like now. And I would really love it if you guys would attend and meet some of our people that way. It's going to be a really great experience, and of course it's a fundraiser for us as well. So if you like what we're doing and you want to support a model like ours, we would really love your support. So that's August 28th. If you're on our email list, then you'll get the email with information about how to